Welcome, welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Doing business and life with a purpose, serving others and achieving success. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. We created this podcast show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated to learn how to do business and live life, which I think is most important to make an impact in the world. I want you to think about, as you listen to my incredible guest today, how will you serve today? And what's that impact you're going to create today from that serving or whatever you do today, tomorrow, or the next day? But let's start right now. My guest, in his bio, Fortune 500 speaker, which gives you the expertise. He's done it. He's taught to people, but he's really mastered the art of storytelling. And in his business title is Million Dreams. That's why I wanted him on the show, because I want at least one dream. If I can get 1 million, I'm going to make a lot of money. Nolan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Steve. I've been looking forward to chatting with you, and congrats on all the success of the podcast and what you're doing here. It's really incredible.
Thank you so much. So tell me, Million Dreams, where'd that come from? What was your thought when you developed that?
Yeah, so when people hear a million dreams, they think of the song from the Greatest Showman movie, and I'm here to tell you that it exactly came from that. I was watching that movie in the beginning of 2018, and when that song came on, it was like second song in the movie. I was in the theater, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want my life to be. And I'm in that theater, and I'm at Virginia Tech. I'm working at Virginia Tech, and I'm watching that movie, listening to that song, and I'm like, that's what I want my life to be. Didn't know what it would look like. At the end of 2018, ended up getting a job in Washington, D.C. for U.S. Travel Association as a video producer. And over the next several years, things just kept building, and then kind of launched A Million Dreams, where I go around and I speak at different conferences, businesses, corporations, doing keynotes, team building seminars, workshops. And yeah, it's really morphed into something that I didn't know what it was going to turn into at the time. But it really started with that movie and started with that song.
Funny, something in our life always kickstarts or is a catalyst for what we do. And
yeah, it's a
sometimes
tipping
it's
point.
a movie. Yeah, a TV show. And that's okay. So when you speak around the country, what is your expertise niche that you love talking about?
Yeah, so I really lean into the intersection of personal and professional well-being. You know, the workplace is really where those two things collide. And there's a lot of challenges in today's world. You know, you look at technology, AI, just it's an election season, it's a lot of stresses in our lives. And I think about an airplane. An airplane always takes off against the wind. FAA, you might notice if you go by an airport, some days it's taking off one way, other days it's taking off the other. That's not because FAA is thinking, I wonder which way we want the passengers to have a view of today. It's strategic. They want the airplane to take off against the wind. And maybe that makes sense to a degree because, kite, you need some resistance to get it off the air. But the crazy thing is that it's more fuel efficient. An airplane uses less fuel taking off against the wind than it does with it. And the reason is because the headwinds actually give the airplane lift and it gets it off the ground quicker and faster. So the question is, in our own lives, in the workplace, how do we bring the best version of ourselves to work? And when we do have challenges and headwinds, how do those wins and challenges actually lift us higher instead of bringing us down? So that's really kind of the lane that I lean into.
I love uplift and efficiency because we try, in serving heart, you want to uplift as many people as you can. I say everybody, you're always a way you can uplift somebody with value, resource, tip, referral, whatever that may be. And I love that. So culture is a big thing in your speaking as well, business culture.
Yes, it is. And I think, the talent shortage, it's never been more competitive to be able to keep talent. And, it's a tremendous opportunity for leaders as well. And I think it goes back to the heart of this podcast, being a servant leader, looking out in the vested interests of others. There's some people will say, what if you take a vested interest in others and those people leave? That's a valid question. But I think the better question to ask, what happens if you don't and they stay? You really have to build a culture that embraces people where they're at. And it's really about a couple of exercises that I do within my keynotes is asking people, where does your motivation for work come from? There's different types of workers. Like there's one, you go into a Starbucks, Steve, and you might see two workers. One worker might want to be, they want to own their own Starbucks. They want to move Seattle and move up the corporate chain and be a C-suite executive within Starbucks. The second worker might be just as good as a worker as that first worker, but their motivation might be they love Starbucks because It's great benefits. They're able to work the morning shift and pick up their kid from school every day at 3 o'clock to be the best mom or dad possible. And that's their motivation. Both workers are great at what they do, but they have different motivation. So as a leader, how do we kind of figure out what is the driving force? What is the motivation behind what they're doing at work? And I guarantee that if you know a little bit more about maybe a personal goal or ambition within the people you lead and what makes them tick a little bit more, they're going to stay longer because most companies and corporations do not think about what is it that the person is wanting, what do they value in their life, and how can our job, even if it's not directly related, support them in their mission.
Yeah, that's such so well said, and it's not hardly it's not hard to do, but it's hard to implement because it's a mindset thing, right?
It totally is. And, I think, just taking a step back and realize, what? Not every employee is the same. We throw around the term human resources. Humans aren't resources to manage, they're people to value. And just that little mindset shift, it reminds me, I want to go back to another airplane analogy, but we all remember the miracle in the Hudson plane.
Mm.
It was in January of, I don't know, 2009 or something around that time. And anyways, that plane was on its way to Charlotte. And I went to the Aviation Museum years ago when I was at Virginia Tech. I did a day trip down there because I love planes. And they had the plane in the hangar in Charlotte because it was on
Mm.
its way to Charlotte. And the plane, they took it there. You can go up to it, and the back's obliterated. It's crazy. But there was a person there that was on the plane because a lot of people live in the Charlotte area because that's where the plane was going to. So I went up to him and asked the question that he's been asked thousands of times probably. What was it like being on the plane? He said something that shocked me. He said it depended on where you sat. He said if you were towards the front of the plane, you had worse landings on land than you did on water. He said as you got
Interesting.
farther back on the plane, it got more and more intense. If you were at the back of the plane, you thought you were going to die. And I just thought about that so much, Steve, because as leaders, of course, in that story, of course, it's the first class that sees it the impacts the least. Of course, it works that way. But the leadership lesson I got out of that is a lot of times when we're in a crisis or we're going through a situation, we might not think the impact is bad, but sometimes as a leader, you got to look up and figure out, okay, what row number am I in? Because if I'm in row 8 or row 12, there's like 20 to 30 rows behind me, and people might be feeling it a little bit differently. So sometimes it's kind of zooming out, seeing the big picture, and realizing, what I'm feeling might not be what the folks are feeling in the back. And sometimes we're in the back and we're getting the brunt of it. But I think as a leader, we really have to take a step back and be like, everybody's going to feel things a little bit differently. And how do I make sure I'm not just in my own world, but I'm seeing the bigger picture?
Now, a lot of people I talk to about leadership talk about a step back. I mean, they may in different ways, but that is important because you need to listen and look and then decide, not decide and, oh, shoot, I mean, do some analysis and qualify things as you do it. Well, we talked before this show, and you mentioned doing video for Vautech Sports. How did that help you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think we were talking about the Greatest Showman song at the beginning, and certainly that was a tipping point, but there was a lot of factors that led up to it. I had dreams in high school. One of my dreams was I was the videographer for the high school basketball team. I wasn't good at basketball, so that's why I was a videographer, so I didn't have to make a shot or a bad pass. So I was doing the video home and away games, and our high school teacher or high school coach of the basketball team said, Virginia Tech has this program where you're on full scholarship, you travel with the football teams, and you do all this work. But there's only two people. They only hire two people a year, and you have to get hired as a freshman. But this is something you can work for. So that was my goal, that was my dream, and they hire in the spring of your freshman year, and it's a competitive process. And long story short, it worked out. And fortunately, I was able to get on with that internship within Virginia Tech athletics, and it was a dream, and it was a dream fulfilled, and that really kind of got me hungry for dreams. And I was there undergrad. I was a graduate assistantship, stayed on within the department, and then I was hired and worked there for 3 years, full-time staff, working with the video board, all the athletics video operations, working with ESPN for the games we would broadcast on the ESPN app. And I would also manage students. I managed up to like a team of 70 students and loved doing workshops and career building things with them. And that's really where I kind of realized, like, when I got to Washington, D.C., I'm like, okay, I've missed this. I missed the doing personal development. And that's kind of when I launched A Million Dreams. But it all goes back to that time at Virginia Tech. And again, we think of the term, going back to an earlier point, the term dream job. Sometimes your job is your dream. When I was at Virginia Tech, I grew up watching Frank Beamer. That was my dream. I mean, there was one point where I was on a private jet going to ESPN in the summer with Beamer. I'm like, how did I get here? Like that job was a dream. And other times, the other side of the coin is that sometimes your job's just a job that enables you to live your dream. When I was at US Travel, I loved US travel. It wasn't my dream job, but it was a job that enabled me to live my dream outside of 5 o'clock. So you can be on both sides of the coin, and not one is better than the other, but it's about kind of taking inventory of yourself of, okay, where's the motivation coming from, and how do I really lean into that?
Dreams are controversial. People say don't dream, have goal, and we're not going to get into that because that's all perception, that's all personal. But how important is being consistent part of your dream?
Yeah, I think everybody has a dream inside of them in some sort of way, and it doesn't have to be anything elaborate either. I think it can be you want to be the best dad possible, or you want to take one international trip a year. It could be anything, but I think having something bigger than yourself forces you to zoom out and realize the world is bigger than what I'm realizing, and just realizing too that what you want to make sure you're aiming for the right things, and just having a bigger picture. It reminds me of one of the stories I talk about, Steve, in the keynotes, is the 2004 Olympics. Matt Emmons is the #1 rifleist in the world, and all he has to do is hit a shot on the board, and he gets the gold medal. And it's multiple rounds. It's super stressful. You have to fire in between heartbeats because it's so precise. It's like being on the 50-yard line, and a 6-inch, about the size of a dollar bill, is how big the target is. The target's on the goal line. That's how precise it is. So Matt Emmons, he's feeling pretty good. He gets up there, fires a shot, bullseye. He's thinking he's got #1. He looks to the leaderboard. His name goes down to 8th place. And he's like, that's weird. He looks again. He realized he fired at the wrong target. He hit a bullseye, but at the wrong target. He says normally he takes a couple seconds to make sure he's lined up right. And that time he was just caught in the moment. So what can we learn from that? It's like we're not trying to hit a bullseye. We're trying to hit a bullseye at the right target. How can we take just a couple seconds to zoom out, make sure I'm aligned right, that I'm aiming for the right things, and not getting so caught in the moment that we lose judgment and lose sight of what's really important.
Dreams and goals are can be combined, collaborated. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a lot of carryover between those things. I think dreams are more big picture, and I would say goals are more granular. I think dreams are long-term vision, things that feel bigger than you, and causes you to stretch. And I think goals are practical. Okay, what does this look like this week, this month, this year? And the goals can serve the dream, and the dreams serve the goals. So I think it goes both ways.
Yeah, and I like that. You really simplified it. It can get very complex. I've heard people get into it like, stop, you're going way over my head. Isn't that? And you make it hard. Dreams and goals are hard to hit, like anything. You don't want to make anything hard for people to do that. So when you keynote speak, talk about A Million Dreams. What is your mission or your goal when you're talking to your audience?
Yeah, when talking to the audience, a lot of times it can be folks in all different job titles and in different positions. Some people are managing, some people are entry level positions. It's really about, okay, how do we give specific tactics for folks to elevate their well-being and be the best version of themselves at work, and at the same time build a culture where everybody feels embraced for who they are, and the differences of motivation. So I think it's really about, how do you feel more connected to your employees, feel more connected to the mission of the organization, and also feel like your own well-being is elevated personally as well.
I've heard this a lot, and I like what you said. That leads to this. CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, they have challenges bringing their dreams into what they do and trying to make it all on the same path, the same journey. You got any tips for that?
Yeah, I think certainly personal aspirations for what employees and teammates, what their personal aspirations are. Does it directly affect the bottom line and the goals of the organization, no. But I think one little thing though that's so key is that when people feel embraced for who they are and,
Mhm.
and the person they are, they're going to stay longer within your organization. They're going to feel more invested. So I think it can be something as simple as when you do a performance evaluation every year, or however it's set up within your business or company, and you have your three goals that maybe that person is measured on that directly affects the values and the mission proposition of the business. I
Yeah.
think there can be one more layer of that. It's like, give me a personal goal. Like next year at this time, what do you want to do personally that's not work related? And if they can feel supported in some way, like if they want to travel internationally for the first time, then what can you do as a leader to kind of follow up and like help support them? Hey, I found this interesting article in this place. You should check it out. Like if they feel supported just in the small ways. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but if they feel like they're meeting their personal goals, it is absolutely going to spill over. I mean, think about it. If you have a lot of stress in your personal life, it's going to spill over into work. If you have a lot of stress in your work life, it's going to spill over to personal. But that can be true on the opposite end too. If you're thriving on the personal end, it's going to spill over into the workplace as well. And I think as leaders zoom out, look at the bigger picture, not only is it the right thing to do, but it's going to help you retain
Yeah.
employees in really a talent battle that's not going to go away anytime soon.
And I love you talked to work-life balance. That's a big subject. Oh, you got to have it. I just don't think it's, you just got to manage it because they're going to spill over one or the other. You know, a CEO's going through a divorce. It's going to affect his company. But how does he do with it with coaching, whatever he does to minimize it so it doesn't affect his company? That's the biggest challenge because it does spill over. It has to. I mean, you can't just walk in your office and go, I'm going through a divorce, but nobody, it's affecting you. And we
Yes.
don't know how, when, or where, but there's a problem there. Challenges for culture and dreams. If you got an employee that doesn't fit the culture to get to your, and probably not dream, but desire or mission for the business, how does a founder, director, manager handle that?
Yeah, so there's always difficult situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes as a manager or a leader, you have to think about is there more to the story here? People typically aren't waking up with a mission of I want to just wreck people's plans. I want to be a pain in the butt. Like people really don't wake up with that mission. There's usually something else there. And one of the things I do, Steve, is I play a clip. It was from the 2015 ACC championship, and this guy is going for a half court shot for $1 million. And I play the clip, and the ball doesn't get to the free throw line. And you can hear boos in the crowd. And when I play that clip at keynotes, people start laughing because it's the worst half court shot I've ever seen. And he knew months in advance. He won a sweepskate. So he knew months in advance he was going to have a shot at $1 million, and he doesn't make it to the free throw line. Well, there's more to the story. Like, see, that guy, he was diagnosed with a disease called CAPS. Only 400 people in the history of the world have been diagnosed with this disease. And he was the first person in the history of the world with this disease to have a kidney transplant. He's taking 39 pills a day. He's going round trip to Baltimore 10 hours every other Friday. And he got a call saying that he won the sweepstakes. And he said, you know what, my childhood idol was Coach Jimmy Valvano from NC State, and his motto was "Don't give up, don't ever give up." I know I'm not going to be able to make the ball to the hoop, but this is going to give me something to work for. It's going to get me out of bed, going to the local basketball court. You know what? I'm still going to do this shot. You know what? It wasn't his job to announce to the arena, "Hey, I have this disease. Take it easy on me." It was up to people like me that was laughing at that shot to be like, I wonder if there's something more to the story here. And I think as leaders, just thinking about, okay, this is a difficult situation. There's probably more underneath here. And the really great leaders, I'm not saying the great leaders need to dissect everybody's story, but can you just uncover and realize that it's probably like a glacier? I'm seeing a little bit above the surface, but there's a lot more underneath that great leaders can really untap potential that other people can't see in themselves. And I think when people feel cared for in all phases of their life, you're going to see a different side of them. So as leaders, it's really asking ourselves, reminding ourselves what we're seeing. It's just the surface. Can you ask a follow-up question in yourself? I wonder if there's something more there, and follow after that.
Culture and building relationships makes that so much easier. You're yelling at your employees all the time, and they won't talk to you. Hey, what's going on? Nothing. I'm good. Nothing. No, just leave me alone. Let me do my work. That, or you gave them time off or something, or hey, take a break, or hey, let me get you a beer bash, or whatever you do to reward, not reward, because I don't like that word, because I mean, I like it, but I think to show your employees your love for them, and I believe love should be in business, they're going to be apt to more talk to you, right? Because you built that
100%.
relationship. Yeah. That's a great
100%.
story, because people, and I tell you, you don't know what shoes the people are walking. You're not walking in their shoes. I don't I always blow that phrase, but people understand. But ask. A good leader asks, right? Ask questions.
Yes, and I think a lot of people think leaders is talking all the time, and certainly there's
Yeah.
moments when leaders have to talk. But brings me back to a quote that Winston Churchill said. He said, "It takes courage to stand up and speak. It also takes courage to sit down and listen." Sometimes as leaders, taking courage is just asking questions and listening and really probing into that. A lot of times as leaders, we don't necessarily need to have all the answers. We need to ask really good questions, and that's going to unearth really good opportunities.
Nolan just gave a great tip there. What he just said about listen. I say shut up and listen. You got to bridge that gap, because a lot of people shut up but they don't listen. Mm, I can stop talking, but if I don't hear what you're saying, and we're doing this podcast, and I go, so how's it being a plumber over in Vautech? Well, you don't have Vautech anymore. You're not a plumber, and it's going to blow the whole show up. But and I've learned to listen much better because of the podcast. You said leader 5, 6, 7 times in this show already, which I'm so happy you have. So give me the audience 2 characteristics of a servant leader.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to that point that you said, Steve. I would say number one, you got to listen well. It's a difference between listening to respond and listening to understand. And I think you really have to listen well. And I think so. I think that's one part of a leader. And then I think the second part is really being able to, like, it really goes back to that servant's heart. I think of really thinking about, okay, the bigger picture here. How can I zoom out and motivate my team well? And I think you really have to be a great motivator, and you really have to connect. It's a relationship building, right? You got to listen well, and number two, you got to build relationships. And I think the interesting thing is leadership is a different skill set, right? So it's funny how I'll give you an example in sports. Sometimes you'll have a great quarterback or a great wide receiver. They're not a great coach. And sometimes you have great head coaches that were very average players. It's because it's a different skill set when you get to that point. And just because you were great on the field does not mean you're going to be great on the headset, and vice versa. It's a different skill set. And I think a lot of times you're promoted into a new role where you have, leadership
Yeah.
capability. You can't rest on what you've done in the past. It's a new skill set. And reminding yourself, you know what? There's new things I have to learn. Like as a leader, I'll add a third point too. You always have to be learning. I think the world's changing. We were talking about AI earlier.
Yeah.
You as a leader, you can't rest in the fact that you know the answers. You really got to keep learning. So it's about listening well. It's about building relationships. And three, it's about learning.
Yeah, those are 3 great pillars for a leader. And not everybody has to be a leader. A leader needs somebody to lead. It's not bad or good. Doesn't matter if you just want to be an 8 to 5 and be led,
Yes,
right?
and I think a lot of times too is you can lead up as well. Like even
Yeah.
if nobody is reporting to you, everybody can. I'm telling you, everybody plays a role in culture, and you can lead from the bottom as well. And
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of different forms of leadership outside of what the organizational chart might say.
Yeah. We're running out of time here, and I'm going to bring you back because leadership is such a big topic. We only hit a piece of it, a small piece. Somebody wants to hire you to speak or wants just to reach out to you. How can they find you?
Yeah, so the best way is just going to the website amilliondreams.info. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on that as well. Starting to build up the YouTube channel, but it's not quite ready for full launch yet. But the best one-stop shop is amilliondreams.info.
That's fantastic. And I want to thank you for being on. I will ask you to come back if you're willing, because we've got to talk more about leadership and all this great stuff that people can learn from.
Yeah, I loved it, Steve. I love this conversation and keep up with the great work with the podcast.
Thank you. Audience, as I always say, listen to this a couple of times. Nolan, my pad's full of notes, of tips to understand them. Read, that's the beauty of a podcast. Either watch or listen to it while you're doing something, or run to a spot. Maybe it's 20 minutes in that says, oh, he said this about leadership. I need to work on this, or I need to reach out to Nolan to do that. So do that. That's the great thing of a podcast. And don't forget about my TV show. It's every Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, called Together We Serve. It's on Roku, of Apple TV, LG TV, all the different streaming services. And our swag is available. You can get your Doing Business with a Servant's Heart swag. I'll have the link in the show notes, as well as all of Nolan's information, so you can reach out to him again and talk to him and get some questions answered about leadership, or have him speak to your audience. I would love that, because I think you're going to learn a lot from him. And with that being said, I want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you at the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. Thank you all.